everybody. I'm so glad to be part of this global studies conference. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go because I'm ill at this moment, and also medical issues forbidden me for travel. But anyway, I would like to present some investigation we've been running for the late year at the New Mexico State University here at the southwest borderland. This is a study which is really interesting in my field, which is special education, and especially special education at this moment is facing a lot of, if I can say it like that, challenges. But here at the borderland is so more special the kind of challenges we are facing here in this globalization since uh, the Juarez El Paso Twin City borderland is such a great example of what globalization is all about right now at this moment. So I thank you again for having me, and I'll start my presentation right now. So I'm going to be talking about globalization, as I said before. I'll be explaining a little bit more what is the U.S.-Mexico border, and I'm also be talking about my field of study, which is social perception, which is really important in the field of special education, and how the social media, the public, and the society in general sees or what kind of perception they have regarding the people with intellectual disabilities, which is also something I'll be talking about later on. So, what is globalization? According to Evans 2005, she's talking about an ongoing process in which the world appears to be converging economically, and it looks like every day the interdependence between the world economies is more tight, and the movements of capital, goods, human resources, natural resources, and people across the borders is growing in the last years. And I would like to talk more about this, like is by explaining what is the U.S.-Mexico border. So the U.S.-Mexico border is one of the longest borders in the world. It runs from coast to coast, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. It has more than 3,000 miles long, but also it's really interesting how two nations face, like two very different nations, one of the most powerful nations in the world with one of the highest incomes and economies in the world, and also facing one of the poorest countries in the world. So it's really interesting to see how this goes in this particular spot. And that's another thing I want to talk about. Like, uh, as Bila said in 2000, we cannot talk about one US Mexico border as heterogeneous place, but we can talk about a US Mexico border in a unique, every twin city is a unique place, and it must be treated different. For example, the borderland between Tijuana and San Diego is absolutely different from the Juarez El Paso border, not even on the geographic field, but also like in the sociological way the people relate to each other. I mean, the labor, familiar, and economic relations people create in these borders. So right now, I'm talking about the U.S.-Mexico border, but when I'm saying U.S.-Mexico border, I'm actually saying El Paso, Juarez, Twin Cities, borderland, which right now has been in the eye of the public worldwide because of this massive immigration process going on there, like a lot of people from Central America coming to this place, trying to cross the border. Some of them are staying in Mexico, some of them are crossing to the US. Some of them have been deported. So right now, this is creating like a really particular thing going on there. Uh, a lot of social problems emerging from that, and it's really interesting. It's a place that I think the whole world has their sight on it right now. And the social perception, which is kind of related with that, is how we perceive the world and how we make sense out of it. Like, for example, we have prejudice or um, interpretations that we do, and without going like into depth analysis. And this is like really important for me because in the way we create stereotypes and how we follow them is how we're going to react towards any demographics. Like, for example, in the way we see women in this US Mexico border, like, for example, in Mexico, there's still a lot of machismo going on. So the social perception we have towards women is totally different than the ones that the Americans have. Like, they're more open, women is more involved in producing, working, and getting educated. So, and for example, this is really important in our field of special education. Like, for example, in Mexico there's still like a big stereotype type kind of thing in the world. Like, for example, we see the disabled people, and I know this is totally wrong, but this is like something that is usual in the Mexican language. Is like calling them like, and I quote, like disabled people, seem like less valuable, like weight that Mexican society has to put on their shoulders, and on the other hand, we can see how the American society is more open to people with disabilities, even though they have a lot of problems too, but how they are trying to, you know, be more open and assertive in the way they're going to educate and in the way they're going to integrate these people into their producing society. So, uh, with that being said, it's important to say that the methods and materials we used for this study was thus a scale of social perceptions, which is a scale that was created originally in 2012 by Molina, Nunez, and Vallejo in Spain, and it was meant to uh, make a measure of how physical education students and higher education students feel or what perceptions they have towards people with Down syndrome. So we make an adjustment to this instrument, and we apply it both in the US and Mexico, like I said, Juarez, El Paso. And we found really interesting outcomings from it. And the problem statement basically was understanding the social perception of these university education students and how they feel about intellectual disability, in this case, really focus on Down syndrome population. Has been recognized by academics before, uh, since this is really visually kind of intellectual disability. So how people feel about it, and for example, this instrument has some constructs as the rights of Down syndrome people to make a family, to have a sexual life, to have fun, and things like that. And some of the questions were like, in a scale from 1 to 5, since this is a Laker scale, people was talking about like, how do you feel if people with Down syndrome try to have a romantic relation with you? Would you feel comfortable, uncomfortable, etc.? And this was really interesting to compare these two populations. So the hypothesis for this study was having an mandatory introductory course of in special education here at New Mexico State. has made the social perception towards people with Down syndrome more positive in the students of education here in the U.S. and in a way different from their peers in the University of Juarez, which is in Mexico. And the results were we analyzed the association between mandatory and introductory course. We see that it's really effective. It's really changing the hearts and the minds of these higher education students. And on the other hand, their peers from Mexico, they are more um, uncomfortable around this population. They don't feel like they want to be around these people or educating these demographics. So it's really a huge difference between these two populations. So uh, I want to thank you for your time. This is really interesting. Yeah, I don't have space to put that bibliography, but please go ahead and QR the, I mean, photograph the QR I have here so you can find really interesting bibliography here. And also, I'm going to leave you my contact information for any question, suggestion, or anything you have in your mind. I'm so happy to answer you. Like, I'm really glad that someone gets interested in this field since social perception is so important for the multicultural and diverse society we are dealing now, especially in the education field, and so important for the special education field right now. So here's my contact information. Please email me or call me, and